There is something incredibly comforting about a letter grade.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like a medical diagnosis or, an engineering spec. You take a test, you get a B minus, and it's right there on the page.
Right. You know exactly where you stand.
Exactly. It's this clean, categorical way of looking at human intelligence.
It gives this massive illusion of certainty.
Yeah.
Like, you are a B minus in history, you are an A in math.
Yeah.
We've basically built an entire societal infrastructure around that specific level of categorization.
But then you look at the actual real world you and I live in, and suddenly that neat little grading system feels completely disconnected from reality.
Oh, for sure.
Because, you don't solve a crisis at work using just math or just history. You use everything all at once.
You really do.
And today, our mission is to explore how generative AI is completely rewiring that old system. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are diving into a massive systematic review by Marvin Staraminsky-Wahara.
That's a fascinating paper.
It really is. It looks at 22 empirical studies published between 2022 and 2025, analyzing how this tech is fundamentally breaking down the walls between subjects in primary and secondary schools.
And doing it at an unprecedented scale.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise we are looking at is that AI isn't just, a super-powered calculator helping kids bypass the work.
Right.
It is acting as a structural bridge. It's moving education away from those isolated subjects and toward what they call integrated curricula. And it's doing this to build the exact 21st century skills we actually need.
And we really want to focus on not just what is changing in these classrooms, but why it matters for you.
Yes, the why is so important.
Because whether you are a parent watching your child navigate a new curriculum, or a lifelong learner trying to stay sharp, or just someone currently navigating the modern workforce.
Which is most of us.
Right. The demand for these new skills is urgent. We are looking at a fundamental tear-it-down-to-the-studs shift from an industrial factory model of learning to something entirely different.
So, to understand how AI is changing education, we first have to look at the psychology of the broken system it's replacing, right?
We do. The research dives deep into this 20th century paradigm, which was literally built for the industrial age.
Yeah.
It relies on compartmentalized subjects and rote memorization, and it uses multiple choice standardized tests to create what the researchers call statistical hierarchies.
Statistical hierarchies, meaning we just rank students against each other?
Exactly. We rank them. But what's fascinating is that the research points out how much society genuinely clings to this system, mostly because it feels safe.
Safe? How so?
Well, Yang and Phelps discuss this in the literature. It feels safe because it provides comparative statistics that reinforce the idea of individual merit.
Oh, I see. It gives parents and universities a sense of objective reality.
Precisely.
Work.
If we can rank thousands of students by a standardized score, we feel like we have a fair, meritocratic system.
Even if the system is measuring the wrong things?
Right. The literature makes a compelling argument that this industrial model utterly fails to capture the multifaceted nature of human potential.
Because it doesn't teach complex problem solving.
Not at all. It measures your ability to recall isolated facts in a vacuum, which, ironically, is the one thing computers now do perfectly.
Yeah, we are basically training kids to be bad computers. I like to think of it as an assembly line for a car.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Think about how a typical high school schedule works. You spend 45 minutes putting on tires in math class. The bell rings.
Right.
Then you walk down the hall and spend 45 minutes painting doors in English class. The bell rings again.
And you move to the next station.
Exactly. But you never actually get to drive the car, or even see how the engine connects to the wheels. You're just doing these isolated tasks on a conveyor belt, assuming someone else will put the car together later.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the modern workforce doesn't want people who can just memorize facts or put on a single tire.
They need people who can drive.
Yes. They need what we call the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, creativity, and collaboration.
The 4 C's. I love that.
The modern world requires you to look at the whole car. So the question becomes, how do we transition a massive, entrenched bureaucracy away from the assembly line?
Right, because if the assembly line model is failing to produce the skills you and I need, how exactly does generative AI fix it?
That's the core of the paper.
Because at the end of the day, AI is just software. How does a piece of code break down massive institutional silos?
Well, generative AI essentially removes the logistical bottlenecks that have kept these subjects separated for so long.
Okay, logistically how?
For decades, progressive educators have wanted to use an integrated curriculum. This means teaching through real-world problem-solving that naturally blends math, science, history, and art all at once.
Which sounds amazing in theory.
It does. But historically, it has been incredibly difficult to execute. In fact, the review highlights 8 specific reasons teachers resist it.
Oh, let me guess. Time.
Time is a massive one. It requires massive amounts of planning time, constant coordination across different departments, and deep expertise in multiple fields.
Right, an English teacher doesn't necessarily know how to grade a complex physics equation.
Exactly. But generative AI solves that. It can synthesize complex information across disciplines in seconds. It helps a single teacher or a small team plan a cohesive, multi-subject project instantly.
So it does the heavy lifting of the curriculum design.
Yes. And we can't ignore the reality here. The students are already there.
Oh, for sure they are.
There's a study from Kopecky and Vora from 2025. It shows over 71% of 18-year-olds are already actively using ChatGPT in educational contexts.
71%. They are way ahead of the system.
They absolutely are.
But I have to push back on this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If the software is doing all the heavy lifting to connect the dots between the subjects, like if the AI is the one synthesizing the history and the math, aren't we risking a generation of students who lose the ability to make those connections themselves?
That's a very valid concern.
Like, are they just getting intellectually lazy because the AI is handing them the integrated car fully built?
That is the most common fear out there. But when researchers actually observe students using these tools, the exact opposite happens.
Wait, really? The opposite?
Yeah. The AI doesn't do the work for them. It acts as a cognitive partner.
A cognitive partner.
Exactly. Let's look at a study by Min and colleagues from 2025. They look at how middle schoolers are using custom large language models for scientific inquiry.
Okay.
They don't just type in a prompt and copy the answer. They engage in continuous multi-turn dialogues with the AI.
What does that actually look like in practice, though? A multi-turn dialogue?
Well, imagine a student trying to figure out why a local stream is polluted. They might start by proposing a basic hypothesis to the AI.
Like, maybe it's the weather?
Right. But the AI doesn't just say you're right or you're wrong. It prompts the student back. It says, hey, have you considered the runoff from the nearby agricultural fields?
Oh, wow. So it pushes back.
It does. And then the student has to go research that variable, refine their hypothesis, and come back to the AI. It's an iterative loop.
So they're actively debating it.
Exactly. Nearly half of the inquiries in these studies involve these complex back-and-forth exchanges. The AI is elevating the complexity of what the student can think about.
By taking over the busy work.
Precisely. By taking over the low-level tasks like formatting data or recalling basic chemical formulas, it frees up their cognitive load so they can focus on higher-order problem-solving.
So it's less of an answer key and more of a really tireless debate partner pushing them to think deeper.
That is exactly what it is.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because we actually have the data to see if this cognitive partner theory works better than the traditional factory model.
Yes, we do.
The real-world results in this review are staggering. We aren't just talking about a slight bump in test scores here.
Not at all. We're talking about entirely new categories of achievement.
Exactly. Look at the large-scale study by Zhao and Gao from 2023. They evaluated over 25,000 students using AI-enhanced systems for science and technology innovation.
That is a massive sample size.
Huge. And these kids didn't just pass end-of-year exams. They used the AI to generate over 75,000 creative ideas. And from those, they actually filed 196 real-world patent applications.
It's just incredible. High schoolers filing patents.
And they won over 400 national competition awards. Standardized tests simply don't capture the ability to invent a patentable product.
They don't. And it's not just ideation, it's actual execution. There was another study by Jiang and colleagues focusing on high school students building virtual pH meters.
Wait, let's break that down because this blew my mind when I read it.
It's wild.
Think about what you were doing in high school chemistry. I mean, I was dipping little paper strips into liquids and trying to guess the acidity by holding the strip up to a color chart.
Right, matching the shade of pink.
It was pure guesswork.
Exactly. And human visual interpretation of those pH strips has an error rate of about 18%. Our eyes just aren't that precise with microscopic color shifts.
So how did the students fix that?
In this new model, The high school students used integrated machine learning to build their own diagnostic tools.
They built the tools themselves.
Yes. They trained the AI on thousands of images of pH strips, teaching the software to recognize the exact RGB values of the chemical reaction.
That is insane.
And their machine learning-based meters had an average error rate of just 3.3%.
Oh.
So these high school students, acting in tandem with AI, built a diagnostic tool that is over 5 times more accurate than a human's visual interpretation.
That is a completely different universe of learning. They aren't just memorizing what acidity is, they are engineering a superior way to measure it.
Exactly. And the researchers actually quantified this shift. A meta-analysis by Hugh and others showed massive gains in computational thinking.
What kind of gains are we talking about?
Well, to put the statistical jargon in perspective, the effect size was 1.104, which is statistically huge.
So the students using AI didn't just do a little better.
No, they leapt ahead. It's roughly equivalent to jumping a full letter grade or more compared to their peers in traditional classrooms.
It's a fundamental elevation of their capabilities. But as you can imagine, this brings up a massive systemic collision.
A huge collision.
Because of the grading. If a student is inventing a patent or coding a highly accurate machine learning tool instead of filling out A, B, C, or D bubbles with a number 2 pencil, how on earth do you grade them?
That is the million-dollar question.
You can't run a patent application through a Scantron machine.
You really can't. And what's fascinating here is the proposed solution. The review introduces a really provocative measurement framework called the Originality and Creativity Index, or OSI.
OSI. So if we are abandoning individual letter grades, a creativity index sounds like it's grading the actual process of invention rather than just memorization.
That's a good way to put it.
What does that actually look like on a report card, though?
Well, it is a portfolio-based collective assessment. Instead of measuring individual memory recall in a silent room, it evaluates those 4 21st century skills we talked about earlier.
The 4 C's. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity.
Exactly. But the crucial differentiator is that OCI focuses heavily on local societal impact.
Local societal impact.
Yes. It requires students to demonstrate how they can apply their knowledge to solve real-world problems in their actual communities.
You know, the review gives a vivid example of this that really stuck with me. Picture a group of high schoolers tasked with reducing urban heat islands in their city.
Such a great example.
They use AI to model the thermal dynamics of different neighborhoods. But they aren't just doing math, they are layering in history by looking at how past redlining practices led to fewer trees in certain districts.
Right, they're integrating history, geography, and urban planning.
Exactly. And their final project isn't an essay. It's a viable green infrastructure proposal that they actually present to the city council.
Real impact.
Or there was another example, middle schoolers collaborating with indigenous elders to preserve endangered cultural narratives. They use AI linguistic pattern recognition to build digital archives.
Blending social studies, language arts, and tech.
Yeah. And under the OC framework, the grade is based on the tangible impact of those projects. Did the proposed green spaces theoretically lower the temperature in the model?
Did the digital archive effectively and respectfully document the language?
Exactly. It assesses the collective output of the team.
It does.
So what does this all mean? Because if OC grades a collective portfolio, how do you deal with the classic group project problem?
The dreaded group project.
Everyone listening has been there. 3 people do all the research and presentation, and 1 person just coasts along as a free writer, but everyone gets the same A.
It's universally disguised.
Doesn't this terrify college admissions officers who need to know exactly which kid is actually brilliant?
Oh, it absolutely terrifies them. The literature explicitly acknowledges this. Stakeholders have massive anxiety about losing individual statistics and meritocracy.
Because if everything is a group project, how do we know who the standout student is?
Exactly. But we actually have real-world examples of how to solve this. Termot did a study in 2024 looking at International Baccalaureate, or IB schools.
Oh, I'm familiar with IB schools.
They already rely heavily on interdisciplinary, project-based units. And they don't just throw out all individual metrics overnight.
So how do they prevent the free rider problem?
They use a hybrid system. Interdisciplinary, holistic assessments can successfully coexist with traditional grading. But the real key to making collective grading work fairly is using standardized rubrics and, ironically, AI-assisted evaluation tools.
Wait, so the AI grades the AI-assisted work?
In a way, yes. Because students are using AI platforms as cognitive partners, those platforms generate extremely detailed contribution logs.
Oh, I see.
The system can see exactly who iterated on the code, who drafted the historical context, and who refined the hypothesis.
The AI is basically taking notes on who did the work.
Exactly. Teachers can use AI to analyze these complex portfolios and ensure individual accountability within the collective project. It significantly reduces the teacher's subjective bias.
Okay, so we have the technology to do this. We have massive leaps in performance. We have kids filing patents, and we have a theoretical framework to actually grade this new kind of work fairly.
We do.
So why isn't every single school doing this tomorrow?
Well, because the friction between this new technology and the old bureaucracy is immense. It requires a massive systemic shift.
It's never that easy, is it?
Never. Bramley and colleagues looked at schools in the UK attempting this in 2025, and they found a heartbreaking statistic. 100% of the teachers surveyed reported they had the pedagogical motivation to teach this way.
100%. So they all wanted to do it.
They saw the value, they wanted to do it, but 55% of them said they wouldn't continue.
More than half gave up because of the bureaucracy.
Because of the crushing workload and institutional constraints. You cannot ask a teacher to facilitate a deeply integrated community impact project spanning 3 months when the state still requires them to cover 50 isolated vocabulary words by Friday for a mandated standardized test.
Wow. It's like asking someone to change a tire while the car is driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour.
That is exactly what it is.
The technology is incredibly powerful, but the school's infrastructure completely fails to support it. You are asking teachers to overhaul their entire curriculum into the societal impact model without removing any of their previous testing obligations.
Precisely. And this friction forces teachers into 2 distinct camps when it comes to AI. Comerford's 2025 study categorizes them as instructional innovators and efficiency pragmatists.
Instructional innovators, they sound like the ones pushing the envelope.
They are. The innovators are the ones fighting the system, using generative AI to fundamentally transform their lessons into these inquiry-based, process-oriented experiences.
And the pragmatists.
The pragmatists are teachers who are simply trying to survive the workload. They use AI, but primarily just to generate traditional content faster.
Ah, I see.
They use ChatGPT to instantly write 50 multiple-choice questions for Friday's quiz. They use it to grade traditional essays quicker.
So the technology isn't the bottleneck, the bureaucracy is. If the school board is only measuring success by multiple-choice test scores, a burnt-out teacher is just going to use AI to optimize those test scores.
Exactly. Entirely missing the point of the tech. They're just speeding up the assembly line instead of building a new vehicle.
That makes so much sense, but it's also incredibly frustrating.
It is. And this raises an important question, perhaps the most critical warning in the entire body of research, the question of equity.
Equity.
Yes. We noted earlier that generative AI can democratize access to knowledge. A student in a rural town has the same access to the sum of human knowledge as a student in Silicon Valley.
Right.
But if we shift the educational model entirely towards subjective, project-based evaluations that require local societal impact, we run a massive risk.
Because local societal impact requires local resources.
Exactly. Think about the urban heat island project we discussed. A well-resourced school in an affluent neighborhood has the local connections to partner with city planners.
They have the technology, the parental backing, the funds.
Right. They have the financial resources to execute a grand community-wide initiative. A severely underfunded district might struggle just to keep the lights on, let alone coordinate a civic engineering project.
Wow. If your grade depends on changing your community, but your community has no resources to partner with you, you're penalized.
Yes.
So the AI leveled the knowledge playing field, but the grading framework accidentally exacerbated the physical resource gap.
That is the danger. The researchers warn that while frameworks like OCSI are powerful, their successful adoption requires incredibly careful, phased implementation.
You can't just flip a switch.
You really can't. It has to start with teacher leaders, early adopters, who pilot the programs with actual structural support. And it requires serious, dedicated policy work at the government level to ensure technological and financial equity across all districts, not just the wealthy ones.
It's a lot to navigate.
It is.
But let's take a step back and recap this, because the core message here is profound. We are witnessing the very real dismantling of the factory model of education.
Truly escaping the assembly line.
Generative AI is finally allowing us to tear down the artificial walls between math, science, and the humanities. And it's doing this to produce actual real-world impact-elevating students, to build diagnostic tools and file patents by acting as a cognitive partner.
It is a paradigm shift in the truest sense.
And to make sense of it all, our very definition of grading has to shift toward collective frameworks like OCI that value creativity and community impact.
It changes not just how we learn, but what we value as intelligence.
And for you listening, why does this matter to your life right now? Well, the research references recent employer surveys like Reichling in 2024, looking at the modern workforce.
The findings there are so telling.
They really are. The skills currently missing in today's entry-level employees aren't technical skills. They aren't failing because they don't know how to code or use a spreadsheet.
Right.
They are missing resilience, adaptability, and complex problem solving. They are missing the 4 Cs.
Exactly.
This shift in education isn't just a preview of how kids are going to learn a decade from now. It's a mirror for how you need to learn, work, and adapt right now in an AI-driven economy.
It absolutely is. And if we look closely at where this trajectory is heading, there is a profound philosophical implication hidden in this research.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if frameworks like OCI increasingly value collective intelligence over individual memory, and if we are constantly using AI as a cognitive partner in multi-turn dialogues to achieve real-world impact, we have to ask ourselves a really difficult question.
Okay, I'm listening.
Are we reaching the end of individual merit entirely?
Wow.
Think about it. In the near future, will your intelligence even be measured by what you inherently know in isolation? Or will your value solely be defined by how seamlessly you harmonize with your human team and your AI tools to create a shared hive mind?
That is a heavy thought to leave on. We are moving completely away from that single comforting letter grade we talked about at the beginning.
We really are.
And we're stepping into a space where your mind is literally entangled with the technology and the people around you. The assembly line is closing down, and it's an ecosystem now.
Perfectly said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the research, everyone. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep pushing your own boundaries, and start thinking about how you can be a true cognitive partner with the technology in your own life. We'll catch you next time.